Are you guys ready for a little bit of mind-bending stuff? Like, can we, is this, are you enjoying this? Like, this kind of complicated? We will, we will. But I want to ask a question that, like, I agree with you on everything that you said in terms of superheroes and stuff, but there's one thing that I feel like some of these movies, I feel like they display sometimes tenets of Kabbalah in certain ways that we couldn't possibly wrap our heads around. And the idea of a multiverse, when I learned that not your whole soul does not reincarnate into your body, the parts that have accomplished their tikkun, their completion, stay up there. Occasionally they may come down to help you accomplish other things that you need to accomplish, but your entire soul is not reincarnated into every body. Is there other, I mean, beyond the idea of our conception of heaven, are there other universes that our souls may be existing in other bodies? Or is that totally sci-fi and ridiculous?
No, it's not. There are 4 worlds, and there are souls in each of the 4 worlds. They're very different from each other, more and more godly, spiritual, and they each have their type of body. Obviously not a physical body. If it's not a physical body, it can't serve God.
Oh, wow.
So the souls that are in heaven now are waiting impatiently to come back.
Wow.
Because as far as we're concerned, heaven is a very nice place, but it's like a retirement home. And we hate to be retired. Maybe for a month, a year, not forever.
Right.
So all the souls in heaven want to come back and serve God, not be served. In heaven, you are served.
Wow.
Okay, you want to get into some real Kabbalah? Literal?
Yes, please.
When God creates the world, he creates it in a logical sequence, like a ladder, rung by rung, until the creation becomes solidified into a physical, finite, grubby, mundane object. That's so that we can follow the steps back. If he created it just with one fell swoop, there's no way to go back. So he creates it like a ladder so that we can climb the ladder. Each of these steps on the ladder is called a sphera, a divine attribute. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. They're all focused downward. The Chachma faces the Bina faces the Das faces the Chesed. Everything is in a downward linear. When it comes to Malchus, the final of the 10 attributes, it turns around and faces up. So that it receives everything that came before it, absorbs it all, then turns back and creates the next world.
Wow.
That's the attribute of royalty. Royalty is literally in the human, the country empowers an individual. The individual absorbs all of that and then turns around and runs the country. It's an interesting process.
Wow. Very interesting.
That's how democracy works. So democracy is much more godly because it mimics the way God created the world. So the beauty of it is that when God created Adam, not the first man, the first human, because this Adam was male and female. Literally half male, half, like two sides of a coin. One side was male, the other side was female. Siamese twins. Then we're told God separated them, turned them into two separate people, and immediately told them to get married and become one. They must have wondered, we were one. You separate us and then tell us to become one? And also, how, yeah, you can become one in a marriage, but that's kind of poetic. You're not literally one, because you can walk away and...
Right.
So the oneness was much greater before he separated us. And now, yeah, we can achieve a oneness, but it won't be the oneness that we had. So it looks like we're losing ground. We're getting worse, not better. So here is the romantic side of God and the romantic side of Kabbalah, which is Chassidut. The difference between the oneness that existed in creation and the oneness that we achieve through marriage. Adam and Eve were one body, inseparable, but they'll never see each other because they're back to back.
Wow.
So they are in fact inseparable, but not face to face.
Right.
After separating us, we will again become one through a good marriage, not as inseparable as before, but face to face. And that is much better, worth the operation and the recovery,
Right.
so that we can be one face to face.
Wow.
In other words, God creates, and things keep moving down. Eventually you get to Malchus, and Malchus says, wait a minute, where am I coming from? And turns around face to face. So intimacy begins in the last attributes, the lowest attributes of each world.
Amazing.
So Yesod, which is called foundation, the fundamental relationship is male and female. It's the only attribute that comes in male and female. But it's back to back. They're inseparable,
Right.
but it's back to back.
Wow.
The next one, Malchus, turns around to face its creator.
Wow.
That's the feminine trait.
Wow. Amazing. It's amazing. I mean, no human could come up with this stuff. I mean, it's really, this is the mind of God, and it's amazing. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Oh, you mentioned about how our parents, when they die, they're gonna come back the same way they were before, right? So I lost my parents several years ago. I was extremely close to them, right? I always think about it daily basis, right? So when they do come back, they're gonna come back the way they left, or they're gonna come, or if they were not healthy, how would they come back? Would it be the same attitude as they were before? If they were funny before, they're gonna come back the same, and how would they come back?
First of all, any body, a physical body, if it is born, then it is mortal. It'll die. The resurrection is not birth. When the body comes back through resurrection, it will never die again. It's forever. The body will come back exactly in the same shape in which it died, so that you'll recognize it. But then the process of healing will continue until the body is 20 years old. A child who died young, the healing will move it forward until it is 20 years old. Because Adam and Eve were created 20
At
years
20.
old. That's the optimal physical condition.
Sorry, they were created at what?
Now, when everybody is 20 years old, that's going to be a party.
Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I'm very much enjoying this discussion. I appreciate it. I'm learning a lot of things. I just want to know where the biblical source, where in the Jewish Bible are we getting all these concepts from?
The Torah is given in many layers. And that's why it's still alive. Because every couple of 100 years, we discover another layer that re-excites us and re-inspires us so that it's fresh and alive and inspiring. So there is, of course, the written Torah. And there's the oral Torah, Torah Shabbal Peh. The Torah Shabbal Peh is mostly what God told Moshe, but didn't tell him to write it down. So, for example, Moshe comes down off the mountain after 40 days, and he says, men have to wear tefillin. And they said, what's that? It doesn't describe it in the Torah. There's no description. So they said to Moshe, what does that mean? And Moshe described it in detail. It has to be made out of leather, it has to be square, it has to be with black paint, black straps, it has to sit on your head, and it has to sit on your arm. He knew it all. That's the oral Torah. So the oral Torah is God's word, but not in written form. So there's the written Torah, there's the oral Torah, and there is the secret Torah. Moshe came down off the mountain and he taught Zohar, but he didn't write it down. So what is the Zohar? What was taught then, but now it was written down.
Why wasn't it written?
Huh?
Why wasn't it written down?
Ah, why wasn't everything in Torah written down? Well, the practical reason, if everything was on paper, nobody would bother studying it. When I'll need it, I'll look it up. But because it was oral, it had to be remembered, it had to be memorized, so it had to be repeated, and every student had to be a genius. It made it a living, not an archive. So it kept the interest alive. Also another interesting thing, we should maybe talk about it. At Mount Sinai, God said, gather the people and they will hear me talking. And the people said, well, why can't we see you? Let us see you. And God said, no. Listen. I think the reason that Judaism is still alive and we're still Jews and we're still practicing Torah is because we didn't see anything. If we had seen God, we wouldn't be interested in him anymore. Because seeing kills passion. Contrary.
But he tried, didn't he? He tried, and it just dissipated everyone because we couldn't even handle.
We couldn't handle hearing him.
Is that what is that? Oh wow! It wasn't even seeing him. It was.
Seeing.
Oh wow!
But the idea that if you see, you become more passionate, like men
Wow.
are
Yeah.
visual,
Right.
not passion.
Wow.
Seeing does not produce passion. It produces excitement.
Right.
And excitement doesn't last a weekend.
Amazing.
So God said, if you want me, listen. Hear me. You look at me, this relationship will end in a month.
That's to all the men out there.
And the
Listen.
and the women who buy it. So the Kabbalah is the Torah. It's the Kabbalah of the Torah. And it wasn't written down until Reb Shimon Bar Yochai got the courage.
So it was transferred orally for ages?
Yes. So the other parts of the Torah were transmitted by big groups, big yeshivot, one teacher teaching 100 students. The Kabbalah was transmitted one-to-one.
Wow.
So in a sense, it's better preserved. In a big group, you can misunderstand, but when it's one-on-one, carefully chosen, protected, so that's where it is spelled out. Once you hear it, now you look back at the written Torah, and it's right there. It's in the written Torah, but you never noticed it.